Okay, fantastic. Okay, so we are going to jump right in here. We've got a lot to cover. Um, so the purpose of this meeting is to focus on what we need to complete the design tokens pilot. Um, I've written in here, we sort of had this Q1 timeline. That boundary has always been a little fuzzy. Some things of the pilot might extend into Q2, some things from Q2 might extend forward, but that was sort of like the rough boundary for the pilot. Um, but I think we're concerned that we are not on track to get to the point where we've got our current color tokens ready to use by designers, consumed by the product, and sort of aimed at scaling up into the next set of tokens after this. So yeah, the purpose of this meeting is to focus on what do we need to do to pretty much complete the pilot. I'm going to be focused on sort of not getting to answers in this meeting, but more assigning action items, pointing out when we need to create issues, and sort of pulling things out of this meeting so that we can do the work outside of the meeting async in the issues itself. Are there any questions before we start going through some of the agenda items here? All right, no questions. Fantastic. Okay, so we've got a couple of read-only items in here. Please take a look at them, especially the ones around the goals, approach, and considerations. Dan has typed that up very nicely, and so I think if you have any questions about that, reply in there. But I think that's sometimes the perfect thing to take async if we need to work through any of that stuff. On the current roadmap and timeline, roughly the idea is that we are doing the design tokens pilot in Q1. Q1 is at the end of this milestone. The next phase of this is to essentially scale up the tokens, define them, get them ready to use. And then Q3, the idea is to fully integrate them in the product so that at the end of Q3, all colors are tokenized. Components are using them, the product's using them, they're in there. And then that leads into our sort of plan to have dark mode generally available at the end of Q4. Once again, these specific boundaries are a little fuzzy, but that's sort of like the high level plan here. Pausing for questions on that. All right, great. Let's move on to this first point from IP here.
Yes, so sorry I jumped the queue with this. I think many of my questions have been answered by Dan and others, but really thank you, Dan. And I just try to double check on a few things here. I don't know if it's worthwhile reading out. Otherwise, we can also skip it and move to the next point. I was just trying to understand the scope of things, right? And so please stop me at any point. And so the questions were like, hey, we have 100 different colors. There's just a limited amount of things you can style with colors. And what are we talking about? Like how many tokens do we really end up with? And then get this great answer that we basically end up with about hopefully 100 tokens that consumers will use, and 200 to 500 for fiddly things. I think these are actually great answers because 100 seems like manageable for me as end user tokens. However much we want to fiddle is our business, and I hope not too many not too many people, in the design system should be concerned about these other 200 to 500 tokens, and I assume that there's also like a way to go forward to that. Like, I don't think the 200 to 500 need to be ready for GA. Yeah. I don't know. Or different categories. That's good. Read only. Base design tokens, semantic contextual design tokens. Cool. Yeah, no, everything is kind of answered here, and I just wrote long form ahead of the meeting. I don't know if any of these points are worth talking about. Yes. I'm happy is what I'm saying. If if we want to move on, feel free to move on and leave the rest read only here.
I think the number of tokens has been a good question, and Dan's comment here that 200 to 500 as a final number, I think is very useful for us to orient around. Sure, every engineer is not going to use 500 tokens, but when we're talking about migrations, that's kind of the number, probably a number to keep in our mind here. More for the or sort of more for the second and third phases of this work here.
Yeah, I think maybe as a final comment to the iterative process, at some point, and given that a GA is in Q4, I don't think the point needs to be now or even within the next 2 or 3 months. We should, also make a point where, hey, what does GA mean? Does GA mean that all of the 500s are available in use and everything is perfect? Or does it mean like, hey, because we are always iterating, there might be like a token, like a border color somewhere that, next month we are going to split because it makes more sense semantically to have like 2 for the, we just need to draw a line at some point somewhere, right?
I think it's important to say out loud it's dark mode that goes GA rather than design tokens, which should make it easier to say, hey, is this of a quality to be released, generally available? And if and when GitLab does a big blog post about it, and the feedback issue opens, how many comments are you expecting to be?
I think that's also a good note for the sort of deadlines and timelines as well. We're saying we need to be finished with design tokens by end of Q3 so that we can have dark mode GA in Q4. That could be another area where maybe some elements of dark mode are pulled forward, giving us space to spend more time on tokens. Or maybe there are some tokens that we realize we don't need necessarily for dark mode, and we can push those later. I think that's
on the planning side, what I was expecting when putting, product readiness in Q3 and then GA in Q4 is that most of the tokenization will probably be happening in Q3. So we're applying it to Vue components and pajamas, UI components, whatever. You'll know what this is. But then there'll probably be a lot of stuff to clean up still, like areas that are using dedicated single page CSS that are not using components, and we'll still have to do sweeps of that to really be ready for GA, and that's what I expected Q4 to be.
All right, great. Let's move on to these topics that we have all been populating here for the past few days. I've grouped these into a couple of categories so that we can kind of speak about the broader categories in general and not necessarily go point by point here. But something that is coming out, I think the first point here is that the pilots that we've done so far have called out that sort of education and support is a really big category. Around helping engineers and designers both use tokens and know what tokens they are going to, exactly how to use them. I think a big question here is how much of this needs to be done for the pilot versus something that we will sort of produce iteratively over the next few months here.
I think,
yeah, go ahead, Mark.
Going again to Dan's point that it's dark mode that's going GA and not design tokens. As long as engineers feel confident that they can choose the right colors and whatever they need to do to make sure that they don't mess up and cause an incident for dark mode, then that's fine. So we certainly need either documentation. I don't know if the Tailwind effort comes into this. This is an undeformed thought, so someone please jump in.
I mean, Tailwind will certainly help with that for sure, because I guess that's the main entry point for design tokens in the product in a way. So I guess that we expect that from an engineering standpoint, we will be using, I guess, semantic utilities, right? So we want the design tokens names to be reflected in the CSS utils. So you'll be using something like GL text primary instead of GL text gray 900 or anything. So yeah, I think that all CSS utils need to make it easier to consume design tokens. And because we're migrating to Tailwind, we need to take that into account in that migration.
Yeah, that's basically what I was going to say as well, is that Tailwind should solve the majority of the use cases. But there's always those, you know, one-off custom build random things tucked in a corner somewhere in a HAML file that nobody's touched in 5 years that is going to need some attention to.
One thing that is just in the back of my mind is that as Tailwind is generating a ton of utility classes, that could be part of the education pieces. So we need developers to choose more of the tokenized option rather than utilities, because utilities won't change with dark mode, and it's the tokens that will. So, and what I mean by that is that if you're using a utility that's like, you know, space.for blah blah blah, you know, CSS class, that's, unless that's pointing to a token, which it shouldn't, because it's a single unit, right? That should be kind of unchangeable. You wouldn't get any kind of spacing change, or color's probably a better example of that. Like you wouldn't get a color change. So you wouldn't want to be using like a CSS class that is like gray 500 CSS utility or background. You'd actually be wanting to use a background that's more semantic. So
yeah, so we control the whole Tailwind configuration. So we can stop generating base CSS utils. So things that would be called GL text gray 900 could be disabled, and we could only allow things like GL text primary or this kind of stuff. So we can really enforce design token compliant CSS utils if in the long run.
To answer the question, Chris, what needs to be finished to complete the pilot? From my perspective, I don't think any of the questions need to be finished, but what I do think we should have to say the pilot is complete is the confidence and a plan for our approach, because the next phase is scale up. I'd be really nervous if we started scaling up something we have low confidence in. And also, I'm guessing for your and Jeff's perspective, the timeline is nice, but it would be good to have some estimates, and anything that can give us more confidence in how long this will actually take. The sooner we find out, the better.
Yeah, strongly agree with that. Like the roadmap that I put together is based on the understanding that we have today. Like if we get estimates that like this thing is going to take 4 times longer than we thought, great, we'll update the roadmap to reflect that. These are not commitments for anybody. It's just reflecting to the rest of the organization what our plans are.
So I have a question regarding estimates, right? Like I'm just throwing like a random number. Imagine we have 2,500 usages of colors, right? Whether that's in via like one of our classes, GL background blue 500, or whether that's like some styles in our you know, some colors given to Bootstrap, some colors given to what's the third one? Some colors directly used in our GitLab UI CSS, or some colors used in our GitLab CSS, right? These are basically the 4, no, whatevers. Do we expect like in the end to have, you know, because these reflect like 2,500 usages of color, right? do we expect them to go, that number to go down, to go up? Does it make sense to do some accounting now to know like, hey, how much custom coloring are we doing in, you know, with classes? How much custom coloring are we doing with in the CSS directly? How much custom coloring do we have in GitLab UI, right? That would definitely kind of help, right? Are we okay with some tech debt? Because, you know, I assume that Bootstrap, for example, they take certain colors and they use SCSS at the moment to darken or lighten them, right? I assume this is like, we talk about Bootstrap later on in this document, but like, yeah, what is the kind of, I don't know, right? This is something, does it help if we have answers to these questions? Yeah.
When you say custom coloring, are you referring to, like you were saying, like manipulating color values as opposed to like referring to just a hard-coded?
I mean, basically
value
both,
somewhere?
right? Like I
Yeah.
imagine like you are somewhere in the product, let's say the merge request page. If someone defines like in the merge request page CSS border color blue 500, or they you know use a GL blue 500 border, you know, GL border blue 500 on some element, it's basically the same. They chosen a custom color rather than, you know, going with the design system. Is there a reason behind it, or maybe they even overwritten the design system, right? Like, and I assume that, you know, actually every place we use a color needs to be analyzed for this effort, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, and my question is just, do we expect an explosion of it? Because it could be that, you know, we have 300 users of watercolor because of our planned semanticness, we are going to need like 600 differentiations, which would actually mean we need to add more classes somewhere or something, right? Like, it's like, do we expect stuff to grow, to shrink? Like, what is the kind of gut feeling maybe, or like, would it help to do accounting first to then, you know, develop more of a gut feeling? Yeah.
Yeah, I like the idea of doing accounting, just as you point out, like in the move from having a static color to having something semantic, that means that we have to have somebody interpret the intention of that static color. And we can probably make reasonable guesses about a lot of it, but that might involve tapping designers from across the company to add their perspective. And so just the overhead of those conversations is going to really, really drag out the timeline. The earlier we can start them, the better.
So in past experience, like pajamas migration, I think it needed like 1 or 2 quarters to get like people on board and start contributing, right? Like, because there was like, because I assume if you ask a designer in the area, why is there a border color blue 500, they hopefully can tell you within 5 minutes. And similar with pajamas migration, in the beginning, there was a lot of reluctance to, you know, do anything. And once people figured out, hey, these pajamas migrations are actually kind of easy, the OKRs were working out kind of fine, right?
It's a bit different in this case, though. This is kind of strictly about colors, and they're much more, you know, there's no question of like, oh, how do I make this work behaviorally? It's just a color thing. So I think it's going to be significantly easier still than even the simplest pajamas migrations.
Yeah. I mean, it might also
Jeremy's got a hand raise here.
Yeah, I was just going to say that one of the things that if we do some kind of a audit ahead of time, we can identify patterns, and then we can actually start to document things in pajamas that will help head off bad patterns and support good ones, so that as we go through that, we make an easier time for designers to have reference. We would all have the same source of truth that we're pointing people to, like, this is why we're migrating to this, evaluate your UI based on these, you know, qualifications loosely. I will say though that with tokens like spacing, elevation, those types of things, typography, those are going to be more nuanced. So, you know, spacing between elements, that somebody's going to actually have to go in there and determine, like, are these elements related, or are they coupled together? And so there might be some more fine tuning with that, especially when we're talking about just like, you know, between 4 pixels and 8 pixels or 12. So anyway.
All right, so I think the outcome of this conversation is that we need to create an issue to perform this type of review and audit. I see Jeff's already sort of added that comment. But are we able to move on with sort of the thought that we will create an issue to track this activity and we'll figure out exactly when to schedule it? Great. So then the next point here, there is a comment about sort of a pretty long thread about the idea of handoff, how we sort of tell people what tokens to use here. I think this is another one where we need to have an issue to sort of document here's how designers need to tell engineers what tokens are in use. It seems like this needs to be a bit of a collaborative thing because, yeah, we need to figure out how designers can communicate it and make sure that engineers understand it as well. And so I don't think we've got an issue to sort of define this. And so I think that's another thing that we need here.
And it might be that the resolution of that issue doesn't actually come out of this team. But Foundations goes, hey, here's some constraints and things to consider about dealing with design tokens, but handover work in general feels like a bigger design leadership, engineering leadership, trying to figure some of that out as well.
I think that's a very good point, and that ties in, I think, to this idea of sort of leadership or executive direction. We might need some support on. Okay, so I think the next point here is around how can we help bring this closer to the point of use, Figma IDE and MR reviews. That feels a little related to this comment around tooling, linting, and automation. Which I essentially see that the comment is that, yes, we need that. And so it feels like the outcome of this one is that we need an issue to sort of formally decide, okay, here are the tools and support that we need to actually build into things. And then further issues to decide, okay, here's how we'll update the linter, we'll build a plugin, we'll do whatever from there.
To be fair, I think these kind of things are kind of solved on the engineering side, like more or less. I assume that once we have something, like for certain things, it will be really easy to extend. And also the thing that Paul mentioned before, like if we don't allow people to use something, if it's just not there, you know, they can't use the wrong thing. Yeah.
Okay, great. So those are all of the points that we've got under this sort of like education and support category. And the big thing I heard was that we don't need to have these complete in order to finish the pilot. We just need to have the issues created, roughly scheduled, and sort of a plan outlined. And then we will be able to tackle those over the next many milestones. Okay, great. So then I'm going to move on to this token engineering and implementation category. Part of the pilot is to validate the experience and to sort of discover sort of how we can make things easier for people, but also the other part of the pilot is to get tokens working, sort of start to finish across our 3 color tokens. And so I think this is there's another aspect of this in there where it's a little unclear what the current state is of the 3 tokens that we have right now. I think we're aware that our tokens do not sync with Figma yet, but as far as being carried through, available for use by engineers and being consumed by the product, I think that's something we're actually a little unclear on. And so I don't know if anyone can answer that question right now. Are the 3 color tokens sort of available for use and being consumed by the product right now? If I decided to build something, could I use color text primary and have it be accurate?
Given we have an override for GitLab color secondary and dark mode that doesn't match the definition of the dark mode one, I would say it's not ready. Yeah. But if we're not able to use it, we're pretty close with Tailwind, I would say.
So then do we have, I guess, do we already have the issues created to finalize that? I think that's kind of, yeah, when I spend time looking through the pilot epic and clicking through the issues, it's not clear to me if that is something that is being tracked anywhere yet.
I think we probably. So where's the issue about the pilot? Is it an epic probably, right? Is there like an issue to make it available? Design token, sync, engineering pilot. The engineering pilot is still like in last milestone. Okay. I mean, we have issues for it in the pilot epic. We just need to make sure. Token integration. I think we don't need an extra issue for it. We just need to update the
It's already
existing
in there.
information.
Okay.
Cool.
Okay, fantastic. So then there's this point about the naming scheme. Dan, you added that in there. Could you talk a bit more about that? And if, well, essentially, if we need to have an issue for that, or if that's already exists.
I'm going to change this from an unordered list to an ordered list. And then I would love you to say the number so that I can find what you are referring to, please. Cool, there we go. Hit me with a number and letters and stuff.
F1.
20 F. Where are you? 1. There we go. One naming scheme is scalable, usable, and makes sense in GitLab's context. Is there an issue for it? Was that the question?
Yeah. Is there an issue? Also, is this sort of yeah? Is there an issue for that? Is there more context that we need to provide around that?
There might be an issue for it. The additional context is something we were hoping to find out as part of the pilot is, do the names need to be exactly the same between design and engineering tools? So color text primary in one uses a /, the other uses a dot to separate. Does that matter? Should it be the same across all the different languages people write? Create GitLab in. I think there's an issue. I will check. Oh, and the last one is GitLab's context is lots of other companies have done these sorts of things. So there's a whole bunch of different options to choose from, naming standards. Which one makes the most sense for GitLab is the question to answer as soon as possible before we start scaling.
Yeah, this one seems critical to the pilot. Is this does this need sort of design and engineering to collaborate on an answer, or are we waiting for design or engineering? Currently, it's unassigned, and I'm unsure, and it's tagged with both, and so I don't know who should be the DRI for this one.
The names get used everywhere, so I don't think it's. I think it's a shared responsibility to expose the constraints of the different places it needs to end up. I don't think any one designer or an engineer can capture all of that. And then I guess it needs a DRI, which could be anyone, to go, this is what we're going to move forward with. Now I've received all of the information needed to make a decision.
That ties into our inventory that we have slotted for 1611 too. I just linked that up to that token definitions.
Could we then assign Jeremy an IP to that one? IP because I see you are commenting about Tailwind and not fighting that scheme here.
Yeah, maybe Paul would actually make more sense because he has a little bit more experience on the Tailwind side with like what you have done already. But yeah, the thing is, there are certain naming things in Tailwind that I don't know off the top of my head. I just think because this is ultimately probably the thing that we use to deliver our tokens to end users, we shouldn't fight that system, right? Like how Tailwind is naming stuff, because that just makes it harder for people to onboard, but like, you know, and so on and so on. Yeah. So maybe it's worthwhile to have a look and see whether they're compatible.
All right. Then I will assign Paul and Jeremy to that, and we've added a note that this is one of the things that's blocking the pilot, and so we've got an owner for those. All right, next point is around keeping all of the system, all parts of the system linked and in sync. For the token to Figma pipeline, Ian is going to start looking into that and let us know if that's within his wheelhouse. If not, we'll raise the flag and come to you, IP, to see if we can get some support with that one. But then there are a few more points here about Tailwind and the tricky engineering challenge. Could you go into detail a little bit more about those and if that's something we need to create an issue to address?
Sure. So like on GitLab UI's end, the current tokens, like the tech, we have like the single source of truth are these JSON files at the moment, right? And the single source of and these are supposed to go into Figma, but they already go into Tailwind. Obviously, if we add like a new class of tokens, we would need to teach, like build that bridge, but the bridge is like a small bridge. It's not the Golden Gate Bridge. So, and assume you have an existing token or you add new tokens. As soon as we add them, they would just be available in the next GitLab UI update. And so as soon as they are there, as soon as you add them to the tokens, they should be there in Tailwind, and you know, and then as utility classes and ready for use in our CSS, etc. And as soon as you update GitLab UI, then in the GitLab product, they are available for use as well. Yeah, this is under the assumption that our Tailwind migration is basically there, right? So we're always talking about confidence. I have a lot of confidence as soon as Tailwind is working. Most of our worries about how do we deliver the design tokens will be solved, right? My hope also would be that, you know, because GitLab UI goes into the design GitLab.com documentation, that at some point, you know, I mean, these are JSON right now, but basically that we maintain it, you know, at least documentation maybe of individual tokens there as well. So same flow applies. Design GitLab.com would consume the JSONs, you know, and at least for individual tokens, you should have like a tool there maybe, or a list or documentation, whatever. The trickiest engineering challenge, I think, is Bootstrap CSS, because there are ways how to provide colors into Bootstrap, but then I assume that Bootstrap does some magic, like you say, this is the alert color, and then it does darken, lighten, whatever. And this might not play well. So this is something I think where we created an issue yesterday to investigate, right? Yeah, Jeff linked the issue. Man, you're a good PM. So yeah, that should be the investigation work that, you know, tells us how tricky this will be. Yeah. Personally, we're looking into vendoring Bootstrap View. That means Bootstrap views custom CSS and Bootstrap's views JavaScript stuff. I honestly think we are at a point where I don't know if we see ourselves ever updating Bootstrap, like the normal Bootstrap. Maybe it's time to just copy the whatever current CSS we have as well, or parts of it, and then have the total freedom to, you know, remove this automatic lightening, darkening, and use our token there internally. As soon as Bootstrap CSS and Bootstrap Views CSS are part of GitLab UI, we then basically can rely on the Tailwind pipeline again, and you know use apply whatever token we want, or whatever how it works in there. Yeah. Okay.
Are we looking at the Tailwind migration as a blocker for the tokens pilot?
Sorry, pilot or tokens in general?
I'd say pilot.
Maybe with
Um,
naming.
Maybe
That's a
with
good point.
naming, yeah, like that's maybe
That's a
the
good
only
point.
thing. I mean, the classes are already there. I don't even know if we already can use the text primary, text secondary, if it's already there. Maybe Paul knows that better than I do off the top of my head. But I don't think it's a blocker for the pilot.
That's like,
necessarily.
so not a blocker for the pilot, but definitely a blocker for the next phases.
Yeah.
I'd hope that the pilot gives us a good sense of what's going to be possible, what's not going to be possible. So we're not finding out when we go to do it if it's going to be a blocker or not.
One thing, I don't know if UX is aware, but one thing that we have like this big MR that is this close. I'm saying this close. I feel it's at 95%. Paul probably, I don't know what you think. It would enable almost all of Tailwind. Is this potentially a concern that people might start using stuff too early that comes from Tailwind? And is this a concern on the UX side?
Yeah, that was my point earlier about the utility classes. Also, there was one example that I've seen was, for example, out of the box Tailwind might have 40 or 50, I'm just throwing out a number, 40 or 50 spacing utility classes. Well, maybe in our design system, our scale only supports 20. All of a sudden, we're enabling somebody to choose from a vast array of things that we're not providing in our system. So we need to go through the config and actually make sure that it is using what we have in our current system today for all of those different items, whether it be shadow or border radius or color, whatever. So
Gotcha. It's maybe something to keep in.
Do we
in
need
mi-
some
mind.
like early training messaging that we send out to the front end devs and designers? Like we record a 3-minute video and post it in Slack, like, hey, listen to this. Like, we're doing these things. Don't change what you're doing. Such and such is coming later. So we seem to be depending a lot on like, assuming the world doesn't change, we can make this implementation later this year. But yeah, devs are good about finding new stuff to use. Yeah, I'd be happy to record that if we could help like work with design and engineering to like work out a quick script for it.
On the other hand, maybe it's just also something just to monitor, like
Mhm.
for a release or two, because the link that Mark provided, it says, hey, we have about 1,400 custom colors used, and I don't know how many classes we use. If we need to migrate 500 color classes that already exist in our utils anyhow, is it really going to be much worse if it's 600 by the time we are ready for the migration, right? Like, I really don't want to block people doing their work, because otherwise they might find even worse solutions. Like, us saying, oh, shoot, we need to audit all, we need to audit all margin 9 3/4 Hogwarts classes. That's something that's like kind of doable, right? Once we get to it. Yeah.
And the nice thing too about if we're talking about people using Tailwind, that's a really easy find and replace.
Yeah. So I'd rather have them use Tailwind and do the wrong stuff than do the wrong stuff in custom CSS, because that's so much harder to audit.
Fair point.
All right, I think we've covered the comments on, well, have we covered all the questions and comments on the idea of keeping all these different parts of the system in sync? Do you see any, I guess, if you see any anything else that needs to be discussed or decided in this agenda, add a note to create an issue, and then we'll come back around to that to do so. So then let's move on to for Roman numeral 3 about color decisions that should not be part of tokens, things that are unique to a single context. In the plan, we've got this as part of, I think, the readiness or integration phase. So it feels like this is not necessarily needed for the pilot, but it is something that we need to create an issue for to both inventory and decide how we'll handle. Dan has a comment here about how it's part of our process, but it feels like there's more than just the process. There's the actual implementation side of things.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, like you point out, we explore some of the ideas around it in the governance thing. I wonder if it's going to be easy to scale up if we don't know how we're going to handle the exceptions. But maybe I'm putting too much weight on that.
It feels like this needs to be decided before we go ahead and start migrating every single color and token. So I'll make a note to say that this should be part of the product readiness phase and not the integration phase. All right, next question here is about how can we build the new dark mode experience without disrupting the old dark mode experience?
There's an issue where some ideas are being discussed. I will link it up when I find it, but my personal strong opinion is we'll have a better chance of building dark mode if we're not building on top of the old one. Like, we can just see what's been done, and it will look very, 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 very broken, and it'll look less and less broken as we know we've ticked stuff off. But there's a issue already discussing that. There are some different technological approaches to it, but yeah, I'll try and find that issue now.
Maybe this has been covered, but when we say GA, we're meaning beta, right? So no, because okay. Where is our beta phase in here? Where we can release this.
I think that is an excellent question.
We're not in beta. We have the alpha that we are not going to mess with, but we're going straight from our whole new effort to GA, but we're not exposing any kind of beta period to consumers to be able to get feedback and refine like every corner of the product. And I think that's where we could have that opportunity to like, okay, we've got our alpha, our experiment right now. We release this new one as the beta of that, which is more seamless to users. But then it shows a progression for users, but then it gives us that runway to also do those extra refinements. And as part of a beta, we could keep our scope down. I hope I'm not derailing anything, sorry, but we could keep our scope down to say what features are we going to really focus on? Let's focus on AI. Let's focus on pipelines, some of the key use cases of the product first, and really make sure that those are shaped up, and that would give us a little bit more breathing room for refinements. But just a thought of how we can make this feel a little more seamless rather than going straight from our current experiment to a GA of something completely new.
Yeah, I like that idea, Jeremy, especially making sure that end users don't have to make additional selections for this. Like, they want dark mode. They've stated they want dark mode. We're changing how we do it, but we don't need to involve them in the details of that change. So I think, our first alpha of a design token run dark mode could just be the beta of dark mode within the product.
I think there's an action item here to refine the dark mode plan. I think out of everything that we've been discussing, that since that has been towards the end of the year, that's the one that is the least fleshed out. So I think that's the takeaway for dark mode, is that we need to spend more time on that plan, especially as it keeps approaching.
I just want to throw a really big caveat here. I think from an engineering perspective, it's not feasible at all to keep the old dark mode and go greenfield. Why am I saying that? Just imagine we start using a token somewhere, right? That and we are 100% sure that it works in light mode. What does that now mean? We are not going to duplicate our CSS to maintain the status quo for the old dark mode, right? As soon as we change something somewhere, it will have an impact on that old dark mode. And we just need to keep thinking about it, like what happens. Like, we are probably fine if, just accessibility degrades a little bit, like contrast or whatever. But if it, degrades worth enough to completely break that experience or whatever, I think we're in devil's kitchen basically. So like and otherwise we don't want to block our migration being as efficient as possible going forward. I don't like juggling like these two things in our minds is hard enough, and now adding like a third, I would really advise against that.
I think I agree with you. I think one of the advantages we have today is that it's still noted as experimental.
Yeah.
But it's so we can break things, but I know that there's a lot of like emotional baggage that comes with with that, and we know that people have started relying on it. So I think that's a fair point.
I think we should move forward at whatever pace we think is comfortable. If we break stuff, we deal with it once it happens, like how we've been dealing with breaking dark mode right now anyhow, right? Like we don't support it, but if suddenly, something very bright screams at you, people will complain and we usually still fix it, right? So I don't know if we, for example, say, hey, let's replace like a text primary color, but suddenly that current dark mode breaks, we would find a solution at that moment, right? I would say. Yeah.
I think so too, right? I mean, that's a very fair point. And I think like that's why I put we don't officially maintain it, but then our team does quite a bit of maintenance on dark mode whenever we get like reports in, right? So yeah, that might be like on a case by case thing that we can, if something is obviously wrong when we move into that territory, then we can actually fix it for the old dark mode as well, that it's not completely broken. But it might be in a in-between state, right? It's not perfect yet. It might not be like more perfect down the road, but yeah, that it's still usable, because as you mentioned, like a lot of people are actually using it as their mainly driver, and they might rely too much on it for now. So we have to make sure that it works.
All right, we have 10 minutes left, so let's move on to the final section that we've got around planning and timelines. First off, we've got the question around the plan to update GitLab UI and view components to use design tokens. We do have this in the plan in the sort of product integration phase. Since we're talking about sort of fleshing out that plan more, I do think this is something where we at least need to create issues or epics to represent these things. And then I'm asking about the three pilot tokens that we've got right now, because it's saying that they should essentially be ready to go.
Yeah, repeating, either they are able to be used already with because we already have Tailwind there, but I'm not 100% sure. We'll double check. I just know that there already is a difference between GL text secondary and the actual color in dark mode. So we have utilities for those.
Yes, we do generate the utils for through Tailwind for text primary, secondary, and tertiary. But yeah, the same question. I don't know if we have the correct dark mode overrides for those yet.
Great, perfect. Then Sasha is asking, or the next one is around current migrations such as Tailwind and Bootstrap classes. Do we need to discuss this further, or has this already been covered?
Yeah, I'm basically just here because of that question. The question was raised. If the Papercut team could potentially do some cleanup things up front of all the dark mode stuff. And one thing which popped up in my mind was basically if it would be helpful that we do like some Bootstrap class migrations up front. We already did that in recent milestones to upgrade some of the old Bootstrap classes to GitLab UI ones. I'm not sure if you want to do that like in one take, or if you just want to do like a Bootstrap to GitLab UI upfront, and then we might be able to assist with some of the migrations in the next couple of milestones. So yeah.
So the question is there space for Papercuts to help out with this, or is there some advanced work that Papercuts can do?
Yeah, the question is it helpful at all? Like, I mean, we can easily schedule it, right? The question is, does it help? Or is it maybe disturbing? Then we will not do it. So question is more around that.
Probably, maybe if we answer these questions about how many colors are there, maybe we find like a bucket of colors that are, for example, currently just hex colors, and even just digging a little into that or something might be helpful, right? Like, because even right now, if you're like, oh, this hex color is the wrong one, it should be GL Blue 500, it will make a later migration maybe easier, I don't know. And things already more consistent, I don't know. Like, but let's defer the answer, I don't know.
And that's what I'm hearing as well. I would hate to ask your team to spend a bunch of time on this when we don't actually know if it's going to help or not. It's not like the Papercuts team has a shortage of things to do.
Yeah, I guess we
I'm
have some work
generally
for at least 1 or 2 milestones.
It does seem like there is a role for Papercuts to play once we are ready to scale up, but we are just not at that point yet. All right, next point is around the plan to update the UI kit to use design tokens. We've got that in the product readiness phase, which is the next one after the pilot. I think the suggestion here is to create an issue so that we've got that. Well, this will probably be an epic to prepare for that phase of things.
Yep, it should be covered in the Epic already.
Okay.
I believe I'll double check.
And then the same thing for the plan to update the product to use tokens. Update the product is rather broad. Can we, I think Dan, you wrote that one. Is there anything more specific?
No. I mean, I think are we going to do migration days, migration weeks? Is it going to be all our team? Those sorts of things. I think that question's asking about. Is Mark going to have a mega MR again with 6,000 changes, and every product designer has to review it for their area? Who knows? All questions to be answered, and I'm not the right person to answer them.
I think the
So
auditing
then-
idea
sorry,
that we
go
had
ahead, Jeff.
earlier to like surface the areas that need to be impacted would help us understand the size of potential MR and if there are other teams that could help out. This is also something where if we get in early enough, we could ask other teams to add an OKR for helping to support this in Q3 and Q4. But we just need to be very clear about what the ask is so people can plan around their quarters effectively.
Why don't we have a stand-in issue to sort of create the outline, the implementation plan, so that we don't lose track of it. Perhaps does that feel useful, or is that just going to be creating pointless issues?
It's useful to have it as something that we know we need to accomplish. It may get closed when we get there, but at least it'll be an indicator that we haven't done it yet.
All right, fantastic. We have already talked a bit about addressing page level overrides around the idea of doing an inventory, figuring out plans for handling unique uses of color. And so we've only got 3 minutes left here. I would say we don't really have time to continue the discussion synchronously about any of these items here. But I would ask everyone to read through these responses to see if you've got extra flavor to add. I'm going to work with Jeff and IPD to create all of these issues that we've talked about. And other than that, I want to say thanks everyone for participating in the agenda beforehand, getting so many of these questions answered. I am actually kind of stunned that we have worked our way to the bottom of this thing in the span of an hour with everyone on the call. So I think that is kudos to everyone here.
I always like to have the last word because I'm talking a lot. I just want to say, from engineering, I said it yesterday to Chris and Jeff. I really have the confidence, and this is going to be a great year in all of this tech debt. And I really want to instill the confidence from engineering, because the work that I'm seeing so far, like on Tailwind things and so on, is so good. I think in the end, the suffering of UX will only be determined by how many tokens you guys want to, you folks want to create, right? Faster together, that's right.
That's right. All right, thanks a lot, everyone. We will all see you in the issues, and we can continue any extra comments in this doc and also the Foundations channel. Enjoy the rest of your days. See everyone later.
See you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.